Have you ever wondered why some of the world's most famous actors, people who could choose a villa in Italy, a penthouse in New York, or a castle in France, are instead buying homes in the Philippines? It sounds unbelievable at first. Why would Hollywood stars, who have the entire globe at their fingertips, settle in a country most of the world still considers an underdog? But sometimes, truth hides in the places we least expect. And in this case, it begins with a quiet decision, whispered away from paparazzi cameras in the streets of Manila, Cebu, and even the serene islands of Palawan. The first time I heard it, I almost laughed in disbelief. A friend of mine, who works closely with international real estate circles, casually mentioned, "Do you know that a certain Academy Award-winning actor just purchased a beachside property in Bohol? I thought it was a rumor, a playful exaggeration." But then another name surfaced, followed by another. And the pattern became impossible to ignore. Hollywood stars weren't just vacationing here, they were planting roots. What could draw them here, to a country that, for so long, has been overlooked in the international spotlight? The answer doesn't come in a single sentence. It comes in stories, in glances exchanged with strangers, in the way laughter carries through the humid air at sunset, in the way Filipinos welcome outsiders not as guests, but as family. And in the way the Philippines, with all its imperfections, offers something that the glitz of Los Angeles, the order of Tokyo, and the romance of Paris simply cannot. One story in particular struck me deeply, and it begins with a name you might recognize: Daniel Harper. Now, you probably haven't seen his real name plastered on posters, but if I tell you he was the supporting actor in several box office hits during the early 2000s, you would picture him instantly. Tall, charismatic, the kind of actor who could play both a soldier and a poet, Daniel spent most of his life inside the Hollywood machine. He had everything: recognition, comfort, security. But beneath it all, he carried something that many celebrities quietly wrestle with: an ache for belonging, for peace, for something real. He first visited the Philippines almost by accident. A film shoot in Hong Kong was delayed, and a fellow actor suggested a short trip to Boracay. Daniel agreed, expecting nothing more than a quick beach escape. What he found instead left him silent. He told a journalist years later, "I remember this old man sitting on a wooden bench near the shore. He had nothing but a simple shirt, a small plastic bag beside him, and the widest smile I've ever seen. He looked at me, nodded, and said in broken English, 'Welcome home.' And I thought, how could he know what I was looking for?" That phrase, "welcome home," never left him. It was the seed that grew into a decision years later to buy a quiet home, not in Beverly Hills, not in Maui, but in Iloilo. The tabloids, of course, ignored this. It didn't fit the narrative, but the people in that small town knew. They saw him not as a star, but as Daniel, the foreigner who waved at tricycle drivers and bought mangoes at the local market. And Daniel is not alone. Another familiar face, whose name I can't reveal here, shared privately that the Philippines was the only place where he felt invisible, in the best way. No cameras chasing him, no headlines dissecting his every move, just neighbors who cared more about whether he had eaten than what his net worth was. So why are Hollywood actors buying homes in the Philippines? The reasons are layered. Yes, it's about beauty. Those untouched beaches and mountain views. Yes, it's about affordability compared to Malibu or Monaco. But beyond economics and landscapes, it is about humanity. The kind that makes even the most celebrated stars feel small again in the most refreshing, liberating way. Imagine walking into a sari-sari store and nobody cares about your fame. Imagine sitting in a humble church in Pampanga on a Sunday morning, hearing voices rise in prayer and realizing nobody is looking at you, they're all looking up. For actors whose lives have been staged, scripted, and spotlighted, this anonymity wrapped in community is priceless. There is a moment I'll never forget. A Hollywood actress, known for her fierce roles, was spotted in Baguio. Instead of luxury boutiques, she wandered through the night market, her hair tied loosely, carrying a cup of Tahoe. A local vendor, not recognizing her at all, simply said, "Ma'am, you want extra arnable?" She laughed. Later she admitted, "In that moment I wasn't a celebrity. I was just human, and maybe that is the real shock." Hollywood, with its billions of dollars and endless glamour, cannot give its stars the one thing the Philippines offers so freely: authenticity. Here, they rediscover the childlike wonder of waking up to roosters, of sharing food with strangers, of being seen not for their fame, but for their humanity. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever thought about what it would feel like if someone famous, someone you've only seen on the screen, suddenly became your neighbor? Would you treat them differently? Or would you do what Filipinos naturally do, offer them a plate of adobo, a smile, and a seat at the table? No questions asked? This is only the beginning of the story. And if you stay with me, you'll see why these stars, with every option in the world, are choosing the Philippines not as a stopover, but as home. When Daniel Harper bought that small property in Iloilo, people back in Los Angeles were puzzled. "Why not Bali? Why not Tuscany?" friends asked him. And Daniel would only smile, almost protectively, as if he didn't want to share a secret he had just discovered. But the truth was, his life in the Philippines was teaching him things he had never learned in Hollywood, even after decades of fame. The first lesson came through the simplest encounter. One evening, Daniel sat on his front porch as a tropical storm had just passed. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth, and children ran barefoot through puddles, laughing as though rain was a blessing, not an inconvenience. An elderly neighbor approached him, carrying a bowl of steaming arroz caldo. "For you," she said softly, as if feeding a relative, not a Hollywood star. Daniel was stunned. He tried to offer money, but she refused. "No, sir," she insisted. "We share." That word, share, echoed inside him. In Los Angeles, sharing often meant contracts, obligations, or strings attached. Here, it was a gesture as natural as breathing. The second moment was even quieter, but it changed him profoundly. On a Sunday morning, he slipped into a small church at the edge of town. It was nothing like the grand cathedrals he had seen in Europe. Wooden pews, cracked tiles, a single electric fan buzzing in the corner. But when the choir began to sing, their voices lifted beyond the walls, filling every corner with faith and warmth. Nobody cared that Daniel Harper, the actor, was there. In that sacred moment, he wasn't a celebrity. He was just a man kneeling among strangers, finding a peace that Hollywood could never script. The third shift came when Daniel experienced a fiesta for the first time. Imagine the colors: streamers hanging across narrow streets, roasted lechon glistening under the sun, and families dancing, laughing, singing without inhibition. What struck him most was not the spectacle, but the togetherness. People who had little by Western standards poured out everything they had in generosity. A group of teenagers invited him to join their dance, cheering when he awkwardly tried to follow the steps. Later, he admitted to a friend, "That was the first time in years I felt like I belonged, not because of what I had, but because of who I was in that moment." These three moments, the arroz caldo, the church, the fiesta, were small, ordinary by Filipino standards, but for Daniel, they became revelations. Hollywood had taught him that value came from attention, applause, and recognition. The Philippines was teaching him the opposite, that value comes from humility, from being unseen, from belonging to something bigger than oneself. And he wasn't the only one. Another actor, known for his action roles in blockbuster films, confessed during a private conversation that he bought land in Davao after witnessing something he couldn't forget. He had been walking along the coast when he saw a group of fishermen dragging in their nets. Their catch was meager, barely enough to feed their families. Yet when they noticed him watching, they called out, "Sir, come, try this fish," and handed him a small piece, freshly grilled over coals. He told me later, "They gave me food when they barely had enough for themselves." That shook me. That's when I decided, I want to live where people's hearts are bigger than their wallets. And perhaps that's the hidden magnet of the Philippines. Not the beaches, though they are stunning. Not the cost of living, though it's undeniably appealing. It is this culture of quiet generosity, this instinctive kindness that doesn't ask who you are, but simply says, "You are welcome here." Now, pause with me for a moment and imagine what it must feel like for someone who has spent decades being recognized everywhere. Paparazzi flashes, autograph hunters, critics dissecting every move. Imagine suddenly being invisible, but in the gentlest way. Nobody chasing you, nobody demanding anything. Just a neighbor offering rice. Just children laughing in the rain. Just strangers making space for you in a crowded jeepney. For some, that kind of anonymity might feel uncomfortable. But for Hollywood actors, weary of the spotlight, it feels like freedom. And here's where the transformation begins. At first, these actors arrive expecting a temporary escape, a hidden beach, a quiet villa, a short holiday. But the Philippines has a way of turning holidays into homes. Because once you taste that kind of peace, once you experience being valued not for your fame, but for your humanity, leaving becomes the harder choice. So when Daniel's friends back in Los Angeles ask him, "How do you live there without luxury malls, without Michelin star restaurants?" he laughs. "You don't understand," he replies. "Here, luxury is not what you own. It's the smile of your neighbor, the sound of the waves at dawn, the taste of mango sweeter than any dessert in Beverly Hills." The Philippines doesn't just give them a house, it gives them a home. And yet, the most powerful shift is still ahead. Because for some of these actors, the Philippines does not simply provide peace and anonymity. It awakens something deeper, a spiritual recognition, a sense of calling, a realization that perhaps they weren't running away from Hollywood. They were running toward something far greater. There is a story that rarely made the headlines, but within the quiet corners of the Philippines, it became almost legendary. A Hollywood actress, celebrated worldwide for her roles in romantic dramas, bought a home in Tagaytay. Her name I cannot reveal, but her reason for staying was not luxury nor convenience. It was a moment that shook her to her very core. She was visiting a small barangay on the outskirts of Batangas when a fire broke out, consuming several wooden houses. No media was present, no cameras rolling. It was chaos, families scrambling to save what little they had. But what she saw in that moment was not despair. It was unity. Neighbors who had lost everything still rushed to help others carry water. A mother, clutching her child, still turned to comfort another woman sobbing beside her. Strangers formed human chains, buckets passing from hand to hand, fighting flames with bare courage. The actress stood frozen. Later she whispered to a confidant, "In Hollywood we play heroes. But here I saw real ones, and they didn't even realize it." That night, she decided to build a permanent home nearby. Not because the landscape was beautiful, though it was. Not because the property value would rise, though it might. But because she had seen something that no script, no director, no red carpet could ever capture. She wanted to stay close to it. She wanted to live where ordinary people carried extraordinary strength. That is the climax of this journey. For actors who have lived in a world built on illusion, the Philippines offers truth. Raw, unpolished, but profoundly moving. They come expecting rest, but they discover resilience. They come searching for escape, but they find faith. And in those moments, something in them awakens. Daniel Harper himself shared a reflection that many Filipinos might find humbling. During one Christmas season, he joined his neighbors for Simbang Gabi, the early dawn masses. He had never woken up at 3 a.m. for worship in his life. Yet as he walked with the crowd in the dark, lanterns glowing softly, he felt a warmth that words failed to describe. The air was cool, the church filled with voices singing with joy, and outside, vendors sold puto bumbong and bibingka, their steam rising into the night sky. Daniel turned to a friend and said, "I came here for peace. But what I found is faith. Not mine alone. Faith that belongs to everyone, shared like light." These are not tourist moments. They are transformations. Hollywood stars discovered that the Philippines is not simply a destination. It is a revelation. It is the place where they are reminded of what it means to be human. And so, the story circles back to the question: why are Hollywood actors buying homes here? The answer, perhaps, is not that they are running away from the noise of Los Angeles, but that they are running toward the voice of something deeper, toward community, toward humility, toward a truth that money cannot buy. For some, it is about family. They see how Filipinos honor their elders, how children grow up surrounded by cousins, titas, and lolos, and they long for that closeness. For others, it is about faith. Church bells ringing, prayers spoken over meals, spirituality woven into daily life. And for many, it is about freedom. The freedom to walk down a street without being hunted by flashing cameras. The freedom to share food with strangers without suspicion. The freedom to belong without conditions. And what about us, watching this story unfold? What lesson does it carry for Filipinos themselves? Perhaps it is this. Sometimes, we forget the treasure we already hold. We forget that the very things foreigners admire, our warmth, our resilience, our faith, are the things we take for granted. It takes the eyes of outsiders to remind us of our own beauty. So the next time you hear that a Hollywood actor has bought a home in Cebu or Palawan or Davao, do not just think of it as another celebrity story. Think of it as a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition that the world, with all its wealth and fame, still finds something priceless here in the Philippines. And if you ever doubt the value of this country, remember the words of Daniel Harper. Luxury is not what you own. It is the laughter of children in the rain, the strength of neighbors in a fire, the faith of people in the dark hours of dawn. That is why I stayed. That is why I will never leave. The world may see the Philippines as an underdog, but to those who have lived here, even just for a short time, it is nothing less than home. The whispers grew louder. At first, only a handful of names circulated. Daniel Harper in Iloilo, a famous actress in Tagaytay, another action star in Davao. But then, stories began surfacing about others. A well-loved comedian buying a beachside retreat in Siargao, a respected director investing in land in Pampanga, even a global superstar quietly purchasing a secluded villa in Palawan. Each story was different, yet all were tied together by a single thread. It wasn't luxury that pulled them here. It wasn't tax benefits or secret investment strategies. It was the Philippines itself, its people, its spirit, its unique rhythm of life. One actor, celebrated worldwide for playing heroic roles on screen, once confided to a close friend, "I spent years pretending to save the world." But it was here, in a small barangay by the sea, that I learned what real courage looks like. He spoke of a fisherman who, despite losing his home to a typhoon, smiled as he rebuilt his hut, saying, "At least my family is safe. We can start again." For a man used to Hollywood's obsession with perfection and control, that resilience was a revelation. Another actress, known for her sharp wit and elegance, shared a quieter moment. In Manila, she had stepped into a modest carinderia one afternoon, hungry and curious. The owner, not recognizing her, served her adobo with rice and a glass of cold gulaman. When she tried to leave a generous tip, the owner refused. "No, ma'am, you are my guest." She later admitted that in that simple refusal, she felt more honored than she ever had sitting at five-star restaurants in Beverly Hills. It's easy to dismiss these stories as mere anecdotes, but when you place them together, a pattern emerges. Hollywood stars are not just buying homes here. They are buying into a way of life that redefines their idea of wealth. For them, the Philippines offers something that the modern world has forgotten: the wealth of community, the wealth of simplicity, the wealth of being embraced without conditions. And here lies the ripple effect. For Filipinos, hearing these stories is more than flattery. It is a mirror, a reminder of values often overlooked in the pursuit of progress. Too often, Filipinos themselves dream of leaving for America, Europe, or Australia, believing that success lies abroad. Yet here we see the reverse. Hollywood actors, with access to every luxury in the world, are choosing to come here. Not for career, not for status, but for something deeper. Isn't that a paradox worth pausing for? The very things many Filipinos think they must leave behind, family closeness, faith woven into daily routines, joy in simple gatherings, are the exact treasures foreigners are searching for. They find it here, and they hold on to it. It reminds me of something Pope Francis once said during his visit to the Philippines. Standing before millions in Manila, he called Filipinos the bearers of faith and joy to the world. At the time, many brushed it off as polite words from a visiting leader. But perhaps he saw what Hollywood actors are now discovering: that the true wealth of this nation is not in skyscrapers or stock markets, but in the strength of its people. And when global figures, whether spiritual leaders or Hollywood stars, recognize this, it does something powerful. It tells the world that the Philippines is not just a stopover or a vacation spot. It is a destination for the soul. But let us not romanticize blindly. The Philippines has its struggles: poverty, corruption, natural disasters. Hollywood stars see this too. And yet, it is often in those very struggles that they witness the greatest beauty: the strength of neighbors helping neighbors, the laughter of children in the middle of hardship, the ability to keep singing even when storms pass through. One actor summed it up best when he said, "In Los Angeles, we chase perfection. Here, I learned that imperfection is not something to hide. It is something that makes people stronger, kinder, and more real. That's why I stayed." And maybe that is the real story. Hollywood actors are not just buying property in the Philippines. They are buying a chance to live differently, to live more humbly, more authentically, more humanly. And for us, the lesson is clear. The world's eyes are turning toward what we already have. Perhaps it is time we see it, too. Have you ever noticed that the most profound decisions in life are often made in silence, away from applause, away from spectacle? That is exactly how many Hollywood stars are choosing the Philippines. Not with press conferences, not with headlines, but with quiet acts of planting roots in a land that feels more like home than any mansion in Los Angeles ever did. I remember hearing about one actor, his name you would know instantly, who visited Palawan not for leisure, but after a recommendation from a Filipino crew member on a film set. He expected paradise, yes, But what he did not expect was the way children on the shore ran to greet him, not with autograph books, but with seashells. They placed them in his hands, smiling as if they had given him the most valuable treasure in the world. That night, sitting by the ocean, he whispered, "This is where I want to grow old." And soon after, he bought a piece of land overlooking the sea. Stories like his are not about fame. They are about finding something timeless. For Hollywood actors, the Philippines is not simply real estate, it is rediscovery. It is the rediscovery of joy in ordinary mornings, of conversations without pretense, of faith that is lived rather than performed. They come expecting a country. What they find is a family. And this is where the story touches us, the viewers, the listeners, the Filipinos who call this land our own. We often underestimate what we have. We chase opportunities abroad, believing that fulfillment waits in foreign lands. Yet here are Hollywood stars, people who already have what we dream of, coming here to claim what we too often forget to treasure. So ask yourself, what is it they see in us that we sometimes fail to see in ourselves? Perhaps it is our resilience, the way we rebuild after every storm. Perhaps it is our laughter, the kind that rings out even in the middle of hardship. Perhaps it is our faith, so deeply woven into who we are that even strangers feel it when they step onto our shores. I think of Daniel Harper's words once more. He said, "I came to the Philippines as a visitor. I stayed because I realized I had been searching for home my whole life. That is not just his story. It is the story of every foreigner who arrives and discovers that this land, this people, this spirit holds something the world cannot manufacture." And maybe that is why, quietly but surely, Hollywood actors are buying homes here. Not because of beachfront views or investment opportunities, though those exist, but because here, in the Philippines, they find what money cannot buy: peace, belonging, and truth. So to you watching this, I leave a thought. The next time you hear about a famous actor walking the streets of Manila, or joining a fiesta in a small town, or lighting a candle in a humble church, don't think of it as a coincidence. Think of it as a recognition. The world, in all its glamour and power, is beginning to see what we have always had. And for us, the message is simple yet profound. Never doubt the worth of your own culture, your own faith, your own way of life. Because while others may come here to find it, you already carry it in your heart. The Philippines may appear small on a map, but in the eyes of those who have truly lived here, it is vast. Vast in love, vast in faith, vast in generosity. Hollywood stars are not just buying homes, they are choosing to belong. And in that choice, they remind us of the treasure we have always possessed. So I ask you, if people who could live anywhere in the world choose to live here, what does that say about the Philippines? Perhaps it says everything. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to be part of the journey. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of the beauty of the Philippines. Leave a comment below. What do you think makes our country so special that even Hollywood stars choose to call it home? And if you want more stories that honor our people, our faith, and our nation, don't forget to subscribe. Together, let's show the world the treasure that is the Philippines.